In my career that now spans over 30 years, I have been fortunate enough to see some of the most amazing technological advances the world has ever known. On that same journey, I have been able to meet some of the smartest and most talented people on the planet. This podcast is where I take a look at the humans behind the technology and understand more about what makes them successful and how they stay sane in a oftentimes crazy world of cybersecurity and information technology. To get this really started correctly, though, I wanted to take some time and talk about something that we are really seeing, and that is stress and burnout in the cybersecurity space. So I sat down with Steve Shelton from Green Shoe Consulting, who specializes in stress and burnout in the technology space, to have a discussion about what's really going on. Steve Shelton, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
So you and I have known each other for a few years now, and I think right from like the first conversation, we had some very similar thought processes on the security and technology industry, or at least the people behind it. And so when I started, this podcast, there was a couple that I really wanted to like dive into because I think as I continue to explore the humanity behind the technology, that what we're going to talk about today is really important. And so with your work and like the stress and burnout and anxiety and all of the things that this industry creates, which I think is, incredibly pressing and relevant, and we'll certainly dive into that. I, as well as you, have forever, our career has been built working around some of the smartest, most talented, most driven, most motivated people on the planet. At the same time, we see that same exact group of people being some of the most stressed out, burned out people on the planet. So let's start with just your thoughts on why. Why are all of these very motivated, intelligent, professional people dealing with these levels of stress?
I think there's a variety of variables. The biggest part of that I see is just the care and the passion behind doing something, one you feel that's really important, that serves a purpose, and you're good at. So, those combinations of things, when you're passionate about those things, it's really easy to overextend yourself and not know how to set up boundaries. It's a lot like an athlete that's just overtraining and doesn't do anything to rest and recover. So, at some point, that athlete, their body's going to break down. In similar fashion, if we as practitioners are super passionate about what we do, we care about what we're doing, we just continue to do, instead of understanding that we do need time to rest and recharge. Our bodies and minds are going to basically force us to take a break.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how big of a problem this actually is. So one of the things that you and Green Shoe Consulting do is you put out your yearly state of stress report, which there is a new one. We'll have a link to how people can get that in the comment or into the description section. But as you went through the process of putting out the state of stress report for this year, like how big of a problem is this? I think it is, but am I overblowing that, or is this really truly as big as I think it is?
It's a very big challenge. So depending on where you look, like if you Google or now go to an AI platform and just put in what are the rates of burnout in cybersecurity, you'll get a variety of rates, but none of them are below 50% in terms of the professionals in the industry dealing with burnout. It's well over 60%, up to 80%, depending on where you look. And so if you think about that in terms of how many professionals are in the industry, there's tens of thousands of professionals in the cybersecurity space. And so if you're dealing with people, even 50% of that being burnt out or dealing with chronic, what we call distress, that's really significant numbers. That means you're dealing with people that are not nearly as engaged and productive. You're dealing with high or really poor retention rates in terms of employees sticking within an organization. You're dealing with a lot of health issues, whether that's ulcers, migraines. Tim Brown from SolarWinds had a heart attack when the SEC charged him personally with that breach at SolarWinds. So there are real legitimate health concerns over dealing with this high level of stress and burnout.
Have you seen other things like substance abuse and medication and all of that sort of thing also kind of running rampant?
Yeah, so The research we did last year, we really didn't get into those components because of the fact we were one, it was the first empirical research on stress and burnout in cybersecurity. We interviewed 40 CISOs across the United States, and we were trying to really get some high level view into starting this big, huge project of trying to uncover what are the causes to the high levels of stress and burnout. How do people respond? Having been in the industry for 20 years myself, witnessing and observing a lot of there's a variety of events where vendors are trying to get cybersecurity practitioners out and about. So steak dinners, a lot of whining and dining, happy hours. So alcohol consumption is a major aspect of the environment and the culture. That also goes into recreational drug usage as well. So I don't have the stats on it, just from firsthand experience. And you might be able to validate this with your experience too. That's a pretty commonplace mode of operation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of, that seems to be a part of this industry. It is very event driven in a lot of ways. In some ways, we're very spoiled. I think those excesses come with their own downsides as well, though, right? And that's certainly one of them. And, I would say, and maybe you've seen some of this too, and what is unfortunately still continuing to be a male dominated field, we're not always as good about expressing our feelings and emotions and actually talking about some of that stuff, which I'm sure probably attributes to a lot of that level of stress as well.
I totally agree. I was laughing because I'm a big fan of Bill Burr and his stand up comedy. His most recent one was called The Drop Dead Years. And
Yeah.
he specifically talks about how men will drop dead from a heart attack between the ages of like 50 and 65, because he attributes that to men not talking about their feelings and just holding it in. And we're allowed to either be fine or angry. Like, that's it. We experience everything else, but we're only allowed and accepted to be fine or angry, right? So if you express, well, I'm sad, that becomes a non-standard response for a lot of men.
I found it fascinating at the beginning of last year. I sent out a survey asking folks in the community here, what sort of events would you like to see more of? Are there specific topics? Are there specific areas of technology that you would like us to dive deeper in? Because, that would help me facilitate putting some events together. The number one request by a mile was more things in dealing with stress and burnout, which showed me firsthand for myself that, if you can anonymize something, that allows people to be willing to have those conversations, that's what they're going to tell you. That it's not the cool new AI technology thing that they're being tasked to work with. I'm stressed out. I'm burned out. One of the things with this industry, it's a pretty good living. So I think, at the same time, you're like, I'm in this career. I can't really go anywhere. I can't make as much money to do other things. So I'm kind of here, but I'm stressed all the time. I'm not very good at talking through all of these things. There just seems like there's a lot that's compiling on everyone. So I guess let's talk a little bit about some things that folks could do or should start doing. If you were sitting down with someone right now and they were like, I am a stressed and burned out technologist, what should I start doing? Like, what is the first thing that you normally counsel folks on doing?
So first is some educational components of understanding, like, what do the words actually mean that we're using. So when we say stress, what does stress actually mean? I think a lot of people have just gotten this mindset that stress is this thing outside of themselves, and so they are not realizing that stress is a natural human response. So in saying that, knowing that it's a natural human response, that's one of the things that we have control over, right? So acknowledging and understanding, like, stress, pressure, whatever you want to call that, is something that we're putting meaning to ourselves. Because the challenge, to your point, there's a lot of really good pay in cybersecurity that also leads to being able to provide for your family, having a nice home, food on the table, whatever it is, right? So there's meaning behind the fear behind the stress that we're experiencing. Often is there's an impact or like pain or harm that's going to be caused to us because it's a threat towards the house we have, the lifestyle that we have, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. And to your prior point, you just mentioned, I can't do anything else. I can't leave this job. That's a story that we tend to tell ourselves. And so I talk often about the fact our minds are really good tools if we train them effectively, but they're also really good weapons that can be used against us, and we're our own worst critics. So
Yeah.
if we're not training our mind typically goes really negative very easily. So it leads into that I can't do this. I'll be happy when this thing happens or whatever it is. We're really horrible at trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. And it's really easy for us to look at things that we've experienced in the past that we no longer have control over and either dragging that into the current moment or saying, well, this thing's going to happen again. And I didn't like it when it happened last time. So I'm worried about it or fearful of it happening again. So it's an aspect of like understanding what do you have control over? Your response to any given situation is one of those things. If you're responding out of fear, it's usually not going to feel good. If you're responding out of your best in terms of like who you are and understanding like your values that drive your words, thoughts, and your actions, and how do you want to respond in alignment with those things, that's usually a more empowering perspective to operate out of because you have control over that versus you don't have control over how somebody else is going to respond. Nobody in cybersecurity has the ability to 100% block all the bad stuff towards your organization. So also understanding that. But there's a lot of things just out of the education component. And then like, what are you focusing on and focusing on things you have control over?
I think that control thing you hit on there is crucial because late last year I was asked by a local university to give a presentation to current students, prospective students, et cetera, for their technology program. And I stayed after to have some one-off conversations. The number one question that I got, in fact, almost the only question that I got was, am I training for something that AI is going to replace? Is Am I going to have a job at the end of all of this? And I think, if you look at a group of people that have, in careers that we've considered safe through most of the ups and downs of the economy over the last 10 or 15 years, even during COVID, right? I mean, we did not feel like we went remote. We were still able to do all of our jobs. So, I don't think there was a real sense of fear. Now, however, with the advent of AI, I think there is a definite advent of inclusion of fear into people's minds and a total sense of being out of control, of not knowing what the future brings. So I'm sure, when you take a group of folks that are already feeling stressed and burned out, and now you put some uncertainty into that very nice life and lifestyle, like you talked about, right? Now there is this fear that something I have no control over may take all of this away from me. I think that adds like a completely extra special layer of stress onto people.
I totally agree. I think there's so much unknown and uncertainty over AI's impact. I mean, we're already seeing it with a lot of organizations that are reducing their headcounts because they are seeing the ability for AI to do certain components of cybersecurity, IT, whatever it is. But over the past year specifically, there's been tens of thousands of jobs, layoffs, and that type of thing where people are dealing with job loss.
Yeah.
So there is a real impact being felt right now. And it's very similar to pre AI of just any companies that were dealing with a downturn in the economy having to reduce headcount because they didn't see enough profit or revenues or whatever it was. So if you're one of those employees that are remaining after a RIF, there's some uncertainty as to how stable is your job, right? So that's one thing. I think also this idea of like, it's really hard for human beings to really wrap their heads around, and I'm talking about myself specifically. How do you wrap your head around the impact of something that's unknown, right? That's a really hard thing to do. So that's again, when you don't have control over that thing, how much time, effort, and energy do you want to spend on that? Because you can drive yourself crazy doing it and be locked and paralyzed by fear. Or can you take that and say, yes, that is a risk. And so all of us in this industry are focused on managing risk as effectively as possible, right?
Yeah.
So then if that is a risk, what can we do individually that we have control over to protect against that risk or go somewhere else, right? So direct our effort, energy into something more worth our time. Because the
Yeah.
aspect is like, I love the idea that before cars and automobiles, everyone got around by horses and buggy. So in Chicago, in New York, there were tens of thousands of people that their job was to pick up horse manure off the streets. How many of those jobs actually exist today? Big goose egg,
Yeah.
right? That market of jobs was heavily disrupted and eliminated. The time frame, however, was a much longer time frame for that to happen. So people were able to wrap their heads around, okay, this is not going to be sustainable. What can I go to now as a means of making money, providing for my family? The runway from an AI standpoint is much shorter and it's a larger impact in terms of verticals, industries, jobs, etc. So the idea is like, what do you have the ability to do at some point 5, 10 years down the road? It gets much more challenging to predict those things. But then you can start looking at things in the marketplace right now in terms of like what are the things, because this is already out there, what are the jobs most likely to be replaced by AI, right? I have a 22-year-old daughter who's in undergrad looking to get a computer science degree. For me, I'm like, okay, what are you looking at from an AI standpoint? Because if you're not learning how to prompt effectively, if you're not learning how to utilize this technology as a tool, your job that you may have had 4 years down the road is probably not going to be there.
Yeah, that's been my feedback to everyone that's asked me that question is, your options are to fight it and lose or to dig into it and then be successful. I think there are certain careers, and I did do a podcast or a video about that folks can look up of careers that I think are actually going to be pushed further ahead with AI, right? So I think there are areas that we can lean in, learn the technology, become proficient at it, use it as the tool that it's really meant to be instead of looking at it as our future overlord. And I think there is still success for humans to be had in this new kind of crazy era that we are rapidly entering or have already entered into.
Yeah. I will add one more thing to that because it connects back to the prior questions or talk points is this aspect of when people really care about what they're doing, they're passionate about what they're doing, they connect into it because they get competent and the skills to do it well. All of those things lead to a lot of motivation to do something. But one of the challenges in the industry also is that a lot of us tie our own identities to the work that we're doing or the job. This is a major impact AI is going to have if your job is getting eliminated or if you get let go from a job. There's an impact to your own identity and sense self-worth. So this aspect of part of the work that we do at Green Shoe is helping people understand, much like Fight Club, you are not your job, right? Date myself with a reference, but the idea is understanding like who you are as an individual and a person, and the fact that the job that you do is not who you are.
Yeah.
That's going to be a major impact for a lot of folks is our society is built on how are you being productive as a member of this society, which productivity leads to a lot of folks looking at revenue and income, and that becomes a self-worth component. But when a lot of that becomes disrupted and eliminated, there's going to be a lot of people not knowing what to do, how to operate because they don't know who they are.
Yeah, and I think that is even a bigger I mean, you could take that exact conversation outside of technology, right? That's going to be a human question moving forward, as so many things that we have historically done are being automated or taken away from us or whatever, of like where do we find our worth? And, I think in some ways, like you just said, we have to reevaluate where and what and how we find our worth, maybe outside of just our work, which honestly, a lot of people do. I think a lot of men do, right? If we go back to, I think this having, certainly any ladies watching, you can correct me in the comments, but I think this probably affects the men in this industry more so. Again, we don't talk about it as much. I think we look at the kind of traditional views of being a provider and all of those other things maybe differently. So I think there's a huge area of concern for me there from the men in this industry.
I will also add, just for that differing perspective, maybe, is the idea that everyone's trying to do their best in life, but also everyone is dealing with expectations that are thrown at them from a society standpoint, culture standpoint, their own personal family standpoint, their cultures, etc. So the challenge really is like understanding, because this is going to come into play also, and I work with a lot of people on this, of what's your definition of success? Because if your definition of success is a certain amount of money, money can go away pretty quickly and easily. There's a lot of people that are just a paycheck or two away from being homeless, having a lot of financial issues. Like, look at how many people in our country are dealing with high debt from a credit card standpoint or whatever it is, living beyond their means. There's a lot of that, but it's an aspect of like trying to manage to some external expectation that really is not your own. So whether you're met male, female, whatever it is, I don't think there's an aspect of like separation, but behind like what people are trying to live to or live up to and those types of things. It's really an aspect of like everyone's trying to project an aspect of something that they think is successful and that gives them some status in their own culture or society. Some of that is healthy, some of that may not be healthy.
Yeah, I think sometimes what our strengths become our weaknesses at some point, right? And I think it is challenging to understand on an individual basis something that I have certainly struggled with in my career and personal life as well is, all of the things that make you who you are. There is a tipping point where that then becomes takes you from a positive that helped you say build a career or a life to one that can cause problems with it as well. If we take this from a different angle, let's say I'm a CISO or CISO or however tomato you pronounce that. I don't know. Put that in the comments too, because I've never been able to figure out the right way to say that. But if I'm a security leader, if I'm a CISO, if I'm a HR director, all of these things and I understand that there is a chance that all of the people that are in my technology departments are going through this. What are some things that you recommend that leaders look for in their employees to start signaling, hey, this person might need some help?
There's a few things. So if it's strictly from a productivity standpoint, there's things like communication styles, right? So the aspect of before I get into communication, are they showing up to meetings on time? Are they putting in good work? Are they giving 100% effort? Do they have a positive attitude? Or is it dipping into an area where they're not showing up to meetings on time? Maybe they would speak up in meetings previously and they're no longer speaking up as much. That's a good indicator. Are they short with other team members and yourself? So not the greatest communication style, and it feels a little bit of a conflict with yourself and that employee or others and that type of thing. I think taking time off and kind of having an aloof attitude, there's some things in there that the way that you talk, the way that you show up to your space, the way that you're behaving, there are things that you can pick up on that when somebody is in a healthy type of mode versus maybe not so healthy or engaged, right? I think that also gets into an aspect of we can typically sense when there's some tension amongst yourself with others that you're engaging with, right? And so your own intuition on if you're feeling some tension, your team members are most likely feeling that tension too. And that goes for other components too. If you're feeling frustrated, frustration, anger, irritation, those things usually come from trying to control things you have no control over, right? I hear a lot of people talking about like, I hate dealing with that person if it's at a different business unit because they're not helpful or they don't follow through or whatever the reasoning is. They're like, I hate dealing with that person. Well, the more that you say that, the more that you make it a self fulfilling prophecy, right? It's the same thing with a leader, their team members. So there's a variety of those things of like, what story are you telling yourself internally? How are you talking out loud? Because if you know that you're going to have to engage with somebody you don't enjoy engaging with, you're going to have a different tone, a different body language, a different engagement with that person versus somebody you enjoy engaging with, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I like concluding any conversation, especially heavy ones, on a positive note. So let's finish up with a couple of things that will take the trajectory somewhere into a positive fashion. Let's say I am a leader and I am starting to notice that some of my folks are showing some of the traits that you just mentioned. What are one or two things that leaders could start doing tomorrow that could, if nothing else, make their employees understand that they are aware of it?
I like to think of this as like one, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, go watch Ted Lasso and be Ted Lasso. Uh,
Yeah.
Being Ted Lasso is a lot easier said than done because that requires extreme selflessness. And it was to his own detriment, which is a whole other thing. But I say that in the sense of like that idea of being selfless is a very important aspect of leadership, or at least effective leadership, in my mind, and based on research as well. So, this idea of Every human being has like five psychological needs across the board: to be seen, to be heard, to matter, to belong, and to be cared for. So if somebody's acting in a way where they're not showing like complete engagement, where they're not being as productive as they otherwise could be or have been historically, something's going on there. So simply checking in, right? Like, hey, like, I'm just curious. And that's the huge component, is being curious and not judgmental, another Ted Lasso aspect. But I'm curious, like, I'm kind of noticing that you're either, I'm not sure if you're sad or something's going on with you. It doesn't seem like you're at your best. Showing some vulnerability also, which is not typically a trait that's been in cybersecurity. This aspect of like, I'm worried about you, like I value you. I'm just curious what's going on. Part of that requires some psychological safety in the environment too. So if you've been operating as a leader that is not offering up a space to where people can come to you and confide in you, means trust is low with you as a leader, right? So then, in order to be trustful, you have to act trustworthy, right? So showing those things of maybe you need to start vocalizing more like some of the stuff that you're experiencing. Because if you're frustrated by other business units, but you're not expressing that to your team, like there's a way to express that effectively, not just blame others or point the finger, because blaming doesn't help change anything, but saying like, you know what, I've noticed that we're having an issue here with this team engaging with this team. I totally see that. And I want to make sure that you understand, like, one, I see that. What are the issues getting in the way? Like, help me understand because I can see the impact on you, and coming at as a servant type of mentality opposed to just dictating what's going on.
I do absolutely feel like we are entering an era where leaders are going to have to be a little more human centric, maybe I hate to say less business minded, but I think there is an aspect of managing people that we've maybe lost sight of or haven't been great at from a leadership perspective in terms of having those types of conversations. I have worked for a couple of managers and now that are very good at having those kind of human level conversations that go beyond, numbers and spreadsheets and I can firsthand, I can tell you, one, I've stayed connected with all of those leaders over the years. We're still friends, even though some have been 15, 20 years ago. And those are the ones that have mattered, the most to me as I reflect back on my career, are the ones that really stand out. So I do think that that's a signal to leaders to understand that, we are, as we enter an era of like Uber technology, that we can't forget the human, right? That human language model, the phrase I'm trying to coin in the era of large language models, that human language model is still important. To wrap up, Steve, let's talk about, let's say I'm listening to this podcast and I've listened all the way through, which thank you for doing. Please like and subscribe. That would be great as well. But I'm listening to this whole podcast and I am realizing that I am myself stressed and burned out. What is one step? What would be the first thing that you would recommend that someone do tomorrow when they wake up to maybe change the trajectory of their career?
So I'll give two things. One is the definition for burnout. There's three main symptoms. One is physical and mental exhaustion. Two is cynicism. So you no longer care about the work that you're doing, how much effort you're putting into it. You've got a negative response to the environment. Third is a feeling of inefficacy. It doesn't matter what you do, you feel like nothing you do really matters or drives any value to the organization. Those three things are the main symptoms for burnout. So I say that because some people could just be exhausted and feel like they're burnt out or say they are, right?
Hmm.
So the understanding of what burnout is really important. Secondly, I would say because there is such a trend for, and sticking with cybersecurity in our industry, that you should be able to do things on your own. You should be able to manage all the stress and the hard times or the hard aspects of the job on your own, that people tend to isolate more, which just makes it worse. People also tend to avoid dealing with the issues for whatever reason or variety of reasons, but avoidance also makes it worse. So the idea here is understanding isolating does not help. Seeking out help, asking for help actually is the biggest first step that you can do, right? So I'll also add in the research over the past 30, 40 years on workplace stress and burnout says the biggest thing that employees responded to when asked, what's one thing that would actually help you feel less stressed or less burnt out in your job? The overwhelming answer was, if I just had somebody I could talk to confidentially, that there was no negative recourse to me talking out and just venting and getting this stuff out, I would feel so much better. It's one of the biggest things that we provide is just that space to be able to vent in a confidential way that has no recourse on you as an employee.
I can tell everyone firsthand that in a lot of ways you have been that person for me over the last couple of years that's given me space when I needed it. And it was completely and totally invaluable in every way to be able to have that. I think that leads to like mentorship and some other stuff as well, right? That we need to continue to push as, like I said, as we enter this crazy era of new technology that changes every day and all of this uncertainty, the one thing that is certain is that people are still people. And if we can, find people at that human level, I think there's still a very happy, prosperous road ahead for humanity as we enter what seems to be a science fiction movie every single day of our lives. So for those of you that have been watching, thank you so much for watching all of this. Please like and subscribe and all of that other sort of important YouTube stuff. If you're interested in having Steve come in and talk to your organization in doing an event for you around stress and burnout in the seminar or in a seminar, all of his contact information will be down in the description. I can tell you again firsthand, everyone that attends or is a part of that is going to be very grateful and appreciative that you did that for them. So, Steve, thank you again. Like we were talking earlier today, this level sets to me this path down finding the humanity under the technology. I think we have to start with the fact that there's a lot of very talented, skilled, smart, professional people that have definitely been feeling it. And if we start from there and keep on with the human language model, again, I think there's good days ahead for all of us people.